In a world where global power usually shifts behind closed doors, through quiet negotiations and carefully engineered trade deals, a sudden shockwave rose from a place the West had long treated as irrelevant. It all began when Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation carved in the heart of the Sahel, refused to accept a punishment designed to keep it trapped in an old colonial cycle. For decades, Burkina Faso exported raw cotton at low prices while Western factories turned it into expensive fabric. But when the country began refining its own cotton, capturing value that had always been taken from it, Europe and the United States reacted with a swift tariff strike. They pushed rates upwards of 40%, assuming the pressure would force Burkina Faso to retreat. But instead of bending, the nation answered with a countermove so bold that it rattled global markets within hours. The Cotton for Tariff Act, a policy designed for emergencies, was activated with a speed that stunned trade experts. Emails were sent to major Western apparel corporations, informing them that all existing contracts had been frozen and must be renegotiated under new terms. In a single day, $5 billion worth of supply routes were thrown into uncertainty. Procurement teams scrambled in chaos, trying to understand what had just happened. What they discovered was a vulnerability no one in Washington or Brussels wanted to admit. The Western cotton supply chain was fragile. American cotton production had been declining for years due to severe drought cycles, soil depletion, rising water costs, and labor shortages. Manufacturers who built their empires on predictable African cotton flows suddenly found themselves without a reliable alternative. Panic set in as executives realized that the very nation they had pressured was the one they needed most. And while corporations scrambled, something powerful was happening on the ground in Burkina Faso. Farmers who had spent their lives being paid pennies for crops worth fortunes finally saw a government willing to fight for them. For the first time, they felt protected instead of ignored. Pride spread across villages as radio stations lit up with callers, celebrating a moment they had waited generations to witness. This was not just a policy shift, it was a psychological revolution. For decades, Africans had been told that global systems were fixed and unchangeable. But suddenly, a small nation proved that the global economy could be shaken by courage and unity. Western analysts labeled it a disruption. Afrikaans called it a beginning. Then, when Mali and Niger, partners with Burkina Faso in the Ease Alliance, publicly expressed their willingness to join a unified cotton policy, the geopolitical stakes doubled overnight. Trade experts warned that a regional cotton bloc controlling production, pricing, refining, and export routes could challenge Western dominance in an industry worth hundreds of billions. Western economies depend heavily on textiles for retail, defense contracts, medical supplies, and industrial materials. The realization that 3 Sahel nations could influence global pricing terrified corporate and government circles. Emergency meetings were held across European capitals as policymakers discussed the possibility that the West was losing leverage over a region it had economically dominated for decades. Meanwhile, African leaders spoke with a confidence that reflected a new era. They emphasized dignity, sovereignty, and partnership built on respect, not exploitation. Across the continent, cooperatives discussed establishing African-owned textile companies, not as a fantasy, but as a strategy. Workers in growing industrial zones imagined a future where African cotton no longer served foreign factories, but fueled African brands competing on global runways. Engineers studied designs for new refineries. Experts debated ways to increase local processing capacity. And young entrepreneurs explored ways to turn cotton waste into renewable energy or sustainable packaging. For the first time in modern African history, the conversation was not about dependency. It was about ownership. In Western media, commentators began questioning why their governments had underestimated Africa for so long. They noted that Europe relied heavily on Africa, not only for cotton, but for cobalt, uranium, cocoa, gold, gas, timber, and labor. The cotton dispute exposed an uncomfortable truth. Western prosperity had quietly depended on African resources more than African nations ever realized. And as the global economy transformed, the old power structures were starting to crack. While panic spread across Western corporate circles, Burkina Faso pushed forward with national development projects. New cotton refineries began expansion plans to increase capacity. Trade officials negotiated with non-Western partners eager to invest in African industries. Regional transportation routes were upgraded to connect cotton-producing areas with manufacturing hubs. By acting decisively, Burkina Faso positioned itself not as a victim of global trade, but as an emerging architect of a new African economic system. As this transformation unfolded, global investors started paying attention. Analysts who once dismissed African markets as unstable began warning clients that ignoring Africa now could mean missing out on one of the most significant economic shifts of the 21st century. And through all this, a deeper understanding emerged. Africa was not rising because the world allowed it. Africa was rising because its own people chose to. If you are still listening right now, then you belong to a rare audience that values truth over noise and seeks depth rather than headlines. And I genuinely appreciate that, because every story on this channel is built on verified research, real data, and careful analysis meant to reveal the global changes shaping our world. Before we close, I want to remind you that our upcoming question and answer session is almost here, where you can ask anything you want about global politics, African economic movements, or any major world event you want explained with clarity. Your questions will shape future episodes. So if you want stories that cut through the noise, expose hidden power shifts, and show how underestimated nations rise into global influence, then make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs to understand this moment, and subscribe right now so you never miss the next chapter of this unfolding transformation.